Chapter 8. How Hope wrestled with Satan and got her own way. "It is well with the child, Maria," said Hope Palma, as she rose from her knees by the bedside and kissed the dead face of her 3-month-old baby. But Maria Ostranaya wept inconsolably. "Dear heart, Matushka, it is no good to weep. He is safely home. He will never know prison cell and chains. He was dearer to me than my life, but I thank God he has taken him to himself. And I do not think he suffered, Masha." "No, he did not suffer. See the smiling face of him," wailed old Maria. "It is the face of an angel from heaven." "In heaven, Masha dear, and that is still better. He will have found my father and mother. Ah, how they will welcome him. He is safe, and I am glad." Her face was thinner than it used to be, chastened to a rarer delicacy by the troubles of the past 6 months, and the great dark blue eyes seemed larger by reason of the soft touch of sorrow below them. But the brave, true spirit shone through undimmed, seemed even to shine the brighter for the fining and chiseling of its tenement. Since the day she had, at Serge's earnest persuasion, gone away into the country for the sake of the expected one, troubles had pursued her like a pack of winter wolves. That hasty and, in her condition, recklessly dangerous visit to the city flung her on the rack concerning him. All their efforts after news of Palma beat themselves to pieces against the adamantine silence of the authorities like spray against a rock. He had been arrested and carried off by the police. Simply that, and nothing more. He had disappeared from human ken, as many another had done before him. His estate was placed in the hands of an official administrator, pending developments, and his wife was left to get along as best she could. And all this at the time when, of all times in her life, a woman needs every help and consideration that outward circumstance may procure for her. That the little one, when it came, was weakly was not to be wondered at. The wonder was that either it or its mother survived so dreadful a time. For 3 months, the tiny life flickered gently in their tender hands and then went quietly out. It was with a new and deeper reverence that Hope recalled the memory of her own mother, who had suffered in her time as she was suffering now. She had her father's intrepid spirit, however. Bend she must before the repeated blows, but break she would not, and as soon as her baby was buried, she turned everything she possessed into money and went up to St. Petersburg to prosecute inquiries after her husband. Wherever he might be, she was determined to follow him, if it were humanly possible to do so. It was for love of her that he had been drawn into the net, and her place was by his side. And moreover, the motives which had in the first place induced her to join her life to his had grown into a close and true affection. He had loved her very warmly, and his nature had deepened and developed by contact with hers. Her marriage had turned out a success, in spite of the fact that she entered into it more from love of duty than for love of the man she married. The search after news of him was heartbreaking work. However, post sent her to pillar, pillar to post, an endless round of supercilious insolences and cold evasions. Her patient endurance of the harassments of her quest might have worked upon a flint, but the hearts of the bureaucrats were unmoved. Her beauty, however, wrought for her where her anxious pleading and visible distress failed. The results of all her inquiries focused at last upon one, Colonel Zazarin, of the Ministry of the Interior, as the man who could help her in her search if he would. Her patient pertinacity in time procured her an interview with him. Colonel Zazarin was a man of commanding bodily presence, but his face was predatory, his eyes and mouth lairs of low gods. Hope recoiled from him with the instinct of a dove from a hawk, of a lamb from a wolf, of a pure woman from a foul man. After a second prolonged stare at her face, the colonel's haughty rigor abated somewhat. He questioned her at length, promised to look the matter up, and told her to return in 3 days. When she went back, he had more questions to put and told her to call again, and again, and yet again. She knew he was amusing himself with her, and that he could probably have put his hand on the necessary papers in 5 minutes, at any time, had he chosen to do so. Questions always, endless questions. She might have been a criminal, and he the examining magistrate by the number and irrelevancy of his questions. And she found it more and more difficult to retain her equanimity under it all. Then, to her great annoyance, he took to calling upon her at her apartments, to ask still further questions, and to convey trifling scraps of information which only kept her hungry for more. With all her might, she strove to keep her anger down, and to close the eyes and ears of her understanding to the meaning of the colonel's distasteful attentions. But it was desperately hard work. It grew beyond her bearing, and at last one day she broke out stormily. "Colonel Zazarin, if you have anything to tell me, tell it me, and let me be gone. If not, pray say so, and I will try elsewhere." And the colonel gazed at her admiringly. Quite so," he said. "But you are so impetuous." She had been in St. Petersburg a month, and knew just as much of what she wanted to know most as on the day she arrived, and of some things much that she would have been glad not to know. "A matter such as this needs time, my dear young lady, time and much careful inquiry. It would not do to make any mistake. Is it your intention to follow your husband? That is, in case we should find that he has been sent away?" "Certainly I shall follow him. Where should a wife be but with her husband? Where has he been sent?" "In certain cases, condemnation cancels all obligations of the kind," said the colonel smoothly. "What do you mean?" "Supposing, for example, your husband should have been sent to Siberia, the law sets you free, your husband has no further claim upon you." The law, she fired. "Your law. I hold myself under something higher. If you will not help me—" Well, I have not said I would not help you." "Where have they sent him?" "To the Kara mines," said the colonel at last. She had feared it and had been prepared for it. Yet Kara was better than the grave, but then she had never been to Kara. "I shall follow him." "Have you money?" "The law. Your law has seized my money," she said bitterly. "I must go as I can." "Will you permit me to—" No. And she started up in haste. No woman could mistake what that meant. Well, but you are so impetuous. If you will go, you will have to get a permit to travel with a convoy. That I have a right to, even by your law. Certainly. Then I will avail myself of it. To whom shall I apply? I will see to it for you, if you will not permit me to. Where can I get it? How soon can I start? I will find out. Perhaps you can make it convenient to call at my office tomorrow. It is a terrible journey. You have no idea what it means. Months of travel, and at the very worst time of year. Wait, at all events, till the spring. I would start this moment if I could. I shall know no rest till I get there. Undoubtedly, said the colonel, who knew a great deal more about it than she did. By one pretext and another, he managed to retard the granting of the permits for nearly 2 months. Then there were delays upon the road, and a weary wait at Tiumen till the Erdish opened, so that May was well advanced before she found herself at last sitting inside the wire cage of the great convict barge, which carried herself and 500 more into exile, and watched the yellow banks drift by into the past, like the lives and hopes they were leaving behind them. Chapter 9. How Hope Shortened the Long Road. In spite of her high courage and fervent spirit, Hope Palma never recalled without a shudder the horrors of that long journey down the Volga, over the Urals, down the Erdish and up the Ob, to Tomsk, and thence along the great Siberian road to Irkutsk. The physical trials of the road, the defective supply of coarse food, the bone-bruising bumping of the springless telegos, the promiscuous herding at night in the filthy, unventilated étapes, the convict stage houses, where the tortured children cried incessantly till they slept and sometimes never woke, and the equally tortured mothers tended them in stony despair. These things burnt themselves into her very soul and would have broken a less courageous spirit. Old Marya had had to be left behind. The paternal government provided transport, such as it was, for convicts' wives and children. But Marya had no such claim, and with unflinching kindliness, Hope had sent her home to her own people, and the loss of her faithful and wholehearted sympathy was to her almost as the loss of a part of herself. What money she had, she hoarded with miserly care, for there was no knowing for what high service it might avail at the end of her journey. Every ruble might be a step towards Serge's enlargement, and she treasured her pieces as the woman of the gospel. And yet, at times, the miseries of those about her prevailed. The little ones crept into her heart and her purse, and precious coins were dispensed for slabs of brick tea and cakes, for any possible sweetening of the bitterness which came home to her so closely. With her sweet, firm face and glowing eyes, and the tender pity of a guardian spirit, she lived and moved among them like an angel of mercy, and smoothed their little passages, to Exile or the stars, as the case might be, as well as she was able, and in such gentle ministries found relief from her own griefs and fears. She talked with the women as they walked, learned their pitiful stories, and gave them much wise counsel which they accepted for the sake of her brick tea, and remembered long after she and her tea had passed out of their lives. She argued with them day by day, and scolded them by night for their many and obtrusively undeniable sins of omission and commission. She saved many a tiny life by her care and insistence. That, indeed, was a doubtful benefit to the little ones themselves, but she could not stand by and see them die. And by her own words and her own high courage, she strengthened into hopefulness many a heart that was weary to death of its load and embittered with the bearing of it. But each day now brought brighter weather, and to that extent softened the asperities of the road. The birches and poplars fluttered trembling welcomes as they passed, as though they feared the law might take official cognizance of more. The children began to stray outside the slow-moving line to gather bunches of forget-me-nots and wild roses, and Hope's sore heart was gladdened, and her eyes filled as the shy little tokens of their remembrance were tendered her. The aspect of the country surprised her greatly. She had thought of Siberia as a mighty desert of snow and ice and desolate wastes, but here were great sweeps of growing corn and pastures and farmsteadings. There were rolling rivers and rustling forests. They walked in clouds of dust, and the children picked flowers by the wayside. But this was midsummer, and Siberia in summer and Siberia in winter are as different as heaven and hell. Chapter 10. How three passed without meeting. On the Volga there is a cliff, but the bureaucrats, for reasons of their own, object to all mention of it, for it recalls a glorious time, long since, when the bureaucrats went under, and for a space a free man ruled a free race, even in Russia. And the would-be frees still sing of that time, long since. But they sing of it below their breath, for the ears of the bureaucrats are long, and their hands are heavy. There are cliffs also on the Yenisei, blue and fair, across the mile-wide stretch of swift-flowing water. And these cliffs, too, are known to free men, and known still better to those who are not free. In a cleft of the hills on the eastern bank, 3 free men lay in the sun and watched the slow, methodic passage of the pendulum ferry as it swung to and fro from bank to bank. It was loaded to the brim each time it left the further bank, and it went back empty. But the crowd on this side grew but slowly, and the packed mass on the other side seemed undiminished by the stolid bites of the big black boat. "Da," said one of the men in the cleft, "there is no end to them." "It is the first party of the season. They have been piling up," said one of the others. "Women too, and children," said the third, and thought of one woman and a possible child. "Always women and children," said the first, "and it is a hard road they travel." And on the crowded boat, as it swung downstream to the length of its tether, one woman looked across at the blue hills and thought that somewhere away behind them lay the man she had come so far to find, and she hoped that it was well with him. When that load was landed, there came a delay in the passage, and those who had already crossed stood up and crowded the bank to see why the boat was coming over empty. But as it drew in, they saw that this journey was devoted entirely to the convenience of one passenger. He lay back in a 3-horse tarantas and seemed to eye the motley crowd on the bank with a more than usually keen and searching scrutiny. At sight of him, a hasty word flew round among the Cossack guards, and they threw up their rifles to the salute, and Hope Palma, who had been watching with the rest, sat down suddenly on the bare earth behind them, and her face was pinched and clouded as she recognized her old tormentor, Colonel Zazarin. "Nu!" said a woman to one of the soldiers as the carriage sped away in a cloud of dust. "The great man is in a hurry. Who is he, little father?" "It is the new governor of Kara. The last one is dead of the fever." "Tell us, little father," said one of the three in the cleft, as they lay on their stomachs, chin in hand, and watched the traffic below. "Why should one man have the power to do all this? After all, he is only a man like you or me. Strip him and set him alongside me, and he is neither more nor less than a man. And yet... The trouble is that if you kill him, there is always another to step into his place," growled the other. "And he, again, is only a man, like the first." "You cannot alter facts by killing men," said the third quietly, very intent upon the scene below. "Unless you kill enough," he added meditatively, "as they did in France. It is a system, and he is at the head. He is probably no worse than any other man." "That is not enough. When all the rest are in his hand, he ought to be more than that. He ought to be the strongest and the best." "Originally, far back, I suppose he was, but it is the system that is wrong." "And we others suffer." "Yes, we others suffer, and will suffer till the system is altered. And that will never be done from the top, and can only be done from the bottom by the shedding of much blood. In France, it ran in rivers." "Tell us how they did it in France, little father." So lying with his chin in his hand, in the slant beams of the sun, Serge Palma told them how France had once shaken off the thrall and risen red and free. And below them the ferry swung slowly to and fro, and the crowd on this side grew greater and greater, till at last the other bank was bare, and the reformed convoy crept slowly away along the road like a crippled snake. And Hope Palma's spirits were troubled at the thought that in seeking the man she wished to find, she must encounter again a man whom she had every reason to fear and mistrust. When the convoy was out of sight, and the eastern hills had relapsed into their natural solitude, the three men in the cleft stole away along the river to find some friendly fisherman who would put them across and keep his mouth shut. And so Serge Palma, known as Pavloff, 6 weeks escaped from Minusинsk, toiled west in quest of his wife, as she was toiling east in quest of him. A strange chance, truly, that brought these two within touch of one another, and yet withheld the meeting. But life is threaded with just such narrow dividing lines. And sometimes we cross them, and with a single step, the whole complexion of a life is changed for good or ill. But more often we press on all unconscious of that which lies so close. We escape disaster by a hair's breadth, and misfortune by an inch. And though man be never so much a free agent, it is comforting still to believe that there is a higher hand which holds the twisted threads and guides the shuttle in its flight. The journey had been a terribly trying one, and in spite of her high spirit and her ministry of help, Hope had felt her bodily strength waning daily. At Irkutsk, with still 1,000 miles between her and Kara, and at the roughest part of the road, she broke down and lay there for a month with a recurrence of her fever, born, no doubt, of the deadly atmosphere of the rest houses. When at last she was able to take the road again, the summer was past. The bracing freshness of the autumn air was very sweet after the weariness of the sick room. She was glad to be among her fellows in affliction again. She pressed on with new hope and unabated courage,